broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Danford, Senior Editor with Modern Machine Shop. Welcome to today's presentation, how HiQA 360 can enable effective communication with your manufacturing quality supply chain. One of the major challenges of outsourcing today is managing part quality throughout the supply chain. Due to current travel restrictions, in-person visits between buyers and suppliers is limited, which delays the qualification of manufacturing and quality assurance processes. Today, we'll cover how HiQA 360 software can help by improving communication and collaboration and relationships between buyers and suppliers in the quality supply chain. Other primary topics we'll touch on include eliminating interpretation errors in quality manufacturing supply chain, and understanding the benefits of using a common language, and finally, enhancing productivity and efficiency. Our presenters today are Sam Golan, founder and CEO of HiQA, and Vice President of Product, Chris Mendocino. As the company's founder, Mr. Golan has helped guide HiQA from the beginning entrepreneurial stages of the business. He has expertise in business development, product positioning, market strategy, and team building, as well as more than 25 years of experience as an international executive, including founding, co-founding, and managing 5 different software companies. Chris Mendocino has been working with industrial manufacturing for his entire career, including designing, selling, servicing, and supporting technologies ranging from CAD, CAM, DNC, OEE, IIoT, and ERP, and now quality management systems. As the VP of Product for HiQA, he focuses on bringing the voice of the customer into the product development process. If anybody has any questions during this presentation, just type them into the interface, and we'll do our best to integrate them into the discussion at the end. Finally, we'll be sending everybody a link via email to the recording in case you missed something or just want to revisit. And you can always visit mmsonline.com and click the webinar tab to find an archive. With all the housekeeping out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead, take it away, guys.
Thank you, MMS. Thank you all for taking the time, participating the HiQA 360. And how to improve communication and collaboration between buyers, OEM, and suppliers. And why do we need to improve supply chain collaboration? It is working so many years. Well, actually, it's not working very well, but we all live in the same environment, and we all experience and probably suffers from the same challenges. And we say it is what it is. But the complexity of today's supply chain with the global market introduce new business needs that are far more demanding than what present quality system provides. Currently, the solutions available at the OEM levels and higher tiers suffer from lack of capabilities or software solution, if you will, that they are focusing mainly on the metadata, rather than on the manufacturing and quality requirement, which is the most critical part in communicating with the supply chain. If we, I don't know if you see those pop-ups, but my apology on behalf of Microsoft, I could not get rid of it from somehow. Well, what does it mean, metadata? This is a quote from a supply chain 24/7 about metadata that says that about 75% of available supply chain data originates from the outside of ERP system. So complexity open risk in miscommunication and disruption by incorrect or incomplete data. So if you look on the why it happens, then it means that because there are not enough data communicated right, then interpretation come to a place like GD&T. And GD&T is one of the main negative factors manufacturing the right part on time, on budget, and on quality. When we talk about the interpretation challenges by expert, well, interpretation, talking about exclusive data that may impact on wrong outcome from what the data originator planned to have as a result. Practically, we are talking about customers or OEM providing suppliers a unique data, which is in most cases 2D print with GD&T or 3D model with PMIs. This unique GD&T language, said Bill Tandler, supposed to be converted to actions without interpretation and describing in details how part or parts will be made with all the requirement and constraints. Peter Zelinsky, and I think our partners in MMS knows him very well, he's a chief editor from Modern Machine Shop, continued this line about GD&T interpretation as Bill Tandler, but he's taking it to, the practical daily work experience. Engineers sometimes are misreading or misapplying GD&T is one thing on the OEM side or the buyer side, but when it happens on the supplier side, it will cause making parts that is not matching design intent. I believe there is nothing new for you here, and I believe most of us, if not all of us, experienced it in the past, experiencing it today, and probably will experience it in the future. This slide talks about the more critical challenges, which we're talking about interpretation cost. And this chart talk about what happened when we talk about interpretation in the supply chain. It's extrapolated. Well, supply chain represent much more critical challenges, which is relies because on metadata and not quality and manufacturing content. And with that, we should look a little bit closer what really happened in the supply chain from the OEM up to the last supplier. So when OEM completed a part or a product design, there are internal processes creating the TDP and all our processes up to PO, which actually Chris, our VP product, will present in a few minutes. Once TDP is ready and it is going from the OEM to tier 1, and from tier 1, it started to propagate it from tier to tier, going to tier 2 and sometimes to tier 3 and sometimes to tier 4. It will be not a surprise for you guys that many OEM has no idea who is really making their parts. And it is not just about the physical distance between OEM and the last tier making their parts. It is about these tier capabilities, skill, certification, their machining types, quality equipment, and the list is much longer. Just to add to this, talking about remote country, making this part, speaking different language with different manufacturing and quality culture, you probably know how communication looks like. Okay? Now, if we are talking about interpretation by supply chain, we can take a quick look on those supply chain fiasco that actually represent the Dreamliner process that happened a couple of good years ago. Just reading, 2 quotes here. This is like outsourcing in general length supply lines create problem with the language and culture, and it's extremely hard to coordinate. You have seen plethora of problem at Boeing. Things get outsourced and they have to come back to Boeing to get fixed. And you can read all those quotes that all of them related to the Dreamliner, and this is only one, product, large one, that caused this issue. So following the previous slides and just reading these few quotes, we can learn well about the challenges through supply chain. Currently, the manufacturing supply chain within any given industry are missing crucial capabilities such as supply chain interpretation, getting manufacturing requirements either on a 2D or 3D model. This is one of the most critical issues not being addressed, as more than 80% of the suppliers getting 2D print and doing their own interpretation for the requirement, and the rest are struggling when they are getting MBD or 3D model with limited or only critical dimension, and now they need to guess what to do with it. Additionally, OEMs lack the ability to automatically and securely manage quality requirement directly from a file because of the missing content capability, and seamlessly communicate, manage, and integrate with the supply chain, even from the bidding stage through designing, manufacturing, engineering changes, and delivery on time, on quality, and on budget. The manufacturing industry is growing fast. This is the good news. Despite of the COVID, manufacturing is growing. A single standard car has about 40,000 parts, and it's growing to 60,000 for electric or hybrid, and going to up to 80,000, 90,000 parts for autonomous car. In comparison, in the aerospace industry, the Boeing 737 has about 1 million parts, and it goes higher with newer and larger model, up to 6 million parts for the 747 8 series. Every 20 seconds, iPhone is built, supported by hundreds of assembly lines, resulting 500,000 iPhone per day. We can get more and more with data with all other industries as medical, oil and gas, and defense. But who makes all those parts? Manufacturing, supply chain. Hundreds of thousands of worldwide suppliers ranked by tier product produce these parts. Millions of parts are manufactured daily. They are made by numerous raw materials and have different manufacturing and inspection processes requirement with frequently change regulation. So if we would like kind of to summarize what we would like to say here, so manufacturing supply chain has many moving parts, which their own challenges and potentially conflict in objective. ERP is a need, no doubt about it, but it is not a solution for supply chain. So scalable, interoperable supply chain planning and optimization platform can be a good solution for supply chain, which I believe we will be able to share today. Kind of on a quick note about HighQA before I'll move it to Chris. HighQA founded about 13 years ago. We serve the whole manufacturing industry from automotive, aerospace, defense, and there is a large professional services team who can do onboarding, including process analysis and all the processes that needs to apply and implement the right solution. We have globally 700 plus customers in all this industry, from small job shop to large enterprises and OEMs. With that being said, which I try to make it short and quick, as I would like Chris to share with you more on the practical way how it works, I will move it to Chris. And thank you for taking the time again. And I will make Chris as a presenter. Chris, you can go ahead.
Yep. Thank you, Sam. All right, should be able to see my side fairly well now. All right, yeah, so as Sam mentioned, the interpretation of quality requirements throughout the supply chain for these large OEMs all the way down is a huge problem in the industry that we've recognized. And there's been solutions that have been brought against it. And one of the things that we realized or identified as a gap in the existing solutions or methods to handle this problem is that most systems are some sort of communication platform or transferring and communicating the metadata about the requirements, but not the actual content. So that's what we want to focus on today, is outlining not just a supply chain portal that's a communication platform, but an entire ecosystem that lets you manage the communication and transfer and sharing of content for the quality requirements. And so let's jump into that. Now, this is kind of the outline of what we're going to go through today. I want to give you kind of a quick overview of that dynamic content flow that we're talking about. We're going to do a couple live demo walkthroughs for the actual product to help you understand kind of how Inspection Manager works, one of our flagship products here, and then how that translates or extends into the supply chain focus and communication. Okay. So let's jump into that flow and that outline. So what we have here is we've got two companies that we're kind of laying out here. So you have this concept of a global engineering, a manufacturing firm that manufactures and procures parts. Okay, so they do both. And then we have a supplier over here that is the contract manufacturer that makes parts for this buyer. Okay, so as an engineering firm or a manufacturer, you may make your own parts. So HiQA has been helping companies manage their internal quality processes, their internal quality requirements, inspection data for many years now. Okay, so we're helping companies build the product and data package, the manufacturing plan data, and then translate those quality requirements, digital inspection requirements, down to their own internal production within their facilities. Okay, so this can be a single site, this can be multiple sites. And then we have unique applications that are all in a singular platform or an ecosystem that are able to connect the shop floor components, the data collection pieces, and bring that all up into a centralized database that manages all of the different touch points throughout the entire quality process. Okay, so whether we're talking about shop floor applications for analog or manual inspections, right? Shop floor applications to manage digital inspections. So if you have handheld gauges that are either analog or digital, we'll interface with all of those and communicate inspection requirements down to the shop floor for inspectors. Okay, and also all of your automated inspection equipment, so CMMs, VMMs, et cetera, that are able to automatically translate data back into the centralized database. Now, this is all within a single manufacturer and what we've been doing for years. So the approach that we're taking to the supply chain is to not just create a portal that sends files back and forth. Okay, we're creating a portal that allows the supplier to function as an extension of the customer's core factory and manufacturing capabilities. Okay, so now in this scenario, the customer or the original buyer is able to design their product and put their quality requirements together. So ballooning a print, creating an inspection plan using the same tools from HiQA, and they can transfer that information, what we call a TDP submission, a technical data package submission, to their suppliers who are also working on the same platform, have all of the same tools that the buyer has at their disposal. Okay, so on the supplier side, from their perspective, the supplier is not able to do anything with regard to manipulating the original design requirements, okay, or the original quality requirements of the finished part. But they're given all of the tools to be able to build the manufacturing plan requirements, because you take a finished drawing, a finished part, and break it into operations so unique inspection plans at each operation. Okay, you add things like your own manufacturing critical features, right? Things of that nature, and sampling requirements and so on. And so you're able to use all of the tools that the buyer had. You're able to use all of those to work on the buyer's part, to manage your quality data, and then submit that back through the system so that the buyer is able to see it on the same side. So we're cutting through the need for email, individual files, things like a lot of companies will use Google Drive and Dropbox and things like that to try to transfer files back and forth, or portals that just you upload files to. That's not happening anymore. This is all dynamically driven through workflows that transfers the data back and forth through a single system. Okay. So now that we understand sort of the core concept, let's actually walk through what that looks like practically. Okay, so this is Inspection Manager. Some of you may be very familiar with this already, but for those of you who are not, I just want to express some of the core concepts within Inspection Manager. This is a system to be able to define the quality requirements starting from a drawing and then all the way through the process like we just discussed, all the way through final inspection and back. Okay, so what I'm going to start off with here is just ballooning this print and using our automated ballooning technology to capture all of the dimensions. So I'm going to come up here, say we're going to auto balloon this part. There's no surface finish requirements on here, so I'm going to take that off and we'll just say okay and let this process. Okay, so our OCR technology is some of the best in the world. We are not aware of any other product that has better auto ballooning and GD&T recognition than what we have on the market today. Okay, so what this is doing, this will analyze any 2D PDF, TIFF, JPEG. We can also handle 3D MBDs and extract PLM data, or I'm sorry, PMI data. PLM, something totally different. But we can interpret PMI data from 3D models as well if you want to work in that environment. But the concept here is that as a buyer or an OEM, I'm designing the original core requirement for the product and all of its quality requirements that I want to pass down to my supplier. Okay, so in a matter of a few seconds here, or a minute, we're able to analyze this drawing and see the auto ballooning process take place. Okay. And you'll see that populate right here. So you can see what it did. There's two key phases that are happening right here. There's the ballooning that's getting applied, and you see that this is all done in a matter of a minute. Okay, and it doesn't matter really. This is a mildly complex drawing. There's customers that we have that have drawings that are dozens or hundreds of pages even in a drawing that we can auto balloon all at once in a fairly short time. Okay, so it's identifying the dimensions and adding unique balloon numbers to them. And there's all sorts of tools that we don't have time to get into for this presentation. We don't want to focus necessarily on the core product, but more the supply chain interaction pieces. So we have this ballooned print, and we have down here a bill of characteristics that was extracted from the print automatically. Okay, so we understand all of the quality inspection requirements of this drawing, the dimensions themselves, the type of the dimensions, all the GD&T requirements, nominal upper and lower tolerancing, tolerance types, and so on. Now, what I've set up here, because we're trying to apply as much automation and get this spec'd out as quickly as possible, I've applied some logic to say, based on the dim types, I'm going to apply gauge categories automatically, all right? So I can communicate to my supplier that we need to see measurement results from a CMM for these some dimensions here. This one, we expect you to use a thread plug gauge, right? So the same way that I would communicate requirements down to my own shop floor, I want to communicate that down to my suppliers as well. And this is really, really useful. Even you can think of this in the quoting stage even, where let's say you have multiple suppliers that all manufacture the same part for you, okay? And you bid out for a particular part and you get drastically different quotes back, right? Because of that misinterpretation factor that Sam mentioned before. People are getting just a drawing and they say, yeah, I can make that. But do they understand exactly how you intend them to inspect it and what all those quality requirements are? Well, now you can define those really quickly up front and move into your quoting process with much more content to be able to get more reasonable quotes from your suppliers. And then when it comes time for production even, then they are able to receive that content as well. So we're able to do things like apply designators here. So let's say I had a few dimensions that are critical Okay, so I might have a few of those. So typically things like, our true position values, some of our diameters that are here, right? So I'll pick up a few of those like so and say that those are critical. So I can just do a bulk update and we'll apply that here. So a designator will say those are critical features, okay? So now my customer knows which ones I care about the most. Now I can even, as a buyer, apply sampling rules and strategies and requirements, say these critical features need to be checked every single piece, 100%, or maybe I only need them to be checked 50%, so on and so forth. So all of that information is able to be defined as the part quality requirements, okay? Now from here, typically, if I was manufacturing my own parts, I would start detailing this out a little further, breaking it into manufacturing ops. But in reality, if I'm sending this out to a supplier, they're going to do that work. And so I'm going to draw the line here, right? Oh, one thing I missed. We can even handle material requirements as well, right? So I'll just do that real quickly. I'll say here, we've got a note here for the particular material. I'll capture that, say that's going to be my material for this part, okay? And you'll see that over here, I can kind of define this if I needed to. Now, all this shows up on the supplier side, so then the supplier is able to define their spec number, cert number, who the supplier was, and the approval, and so on. They can upload their material certs, and you'll see that when we get down to the supplier side, okay? So that can be materials, it can be special processes that are required as well. So all of that is very, very clearly defined up front, okay? Now, I'm gonna take this part, okay, and we're gonna go to our supply chain side, okay? Now, at the supply chain level, I have our company, I have all the various companies that I do business with in here. I'm not gonna necessarily get into that right now, but all my suppliers, vendors, customers, etc., and how I do work with them. And then I've got this concept of purchase orders and work orders, okay? Now, purchase orders are the vehicle by which I communicate my quality requirements down to my supplier, okay? Now, something to really understand here is as soon as we start talking purchase orders and jobs and all that kind of information, a lot of people start thinking about, well, my ERP system already does that. True. We can integrate with virtually any ERP system that's out there. We have an open API that can link data between the other business systems that you have managing your organization and your communication with suppliers. So we're not having to redundantly enter PO numbers, job numbers, et cetera, into multiple systems. We're able to kind of launch orders from the ERP and then have that leveraged into Inspection Manager, so that now Inspection Manager can take just a simple metadata of a PO number and a due date and so on, and apply all of the quality content to that PO record to transmit down to your supplier, okay? So that's really important to understand. Now, what I can do here is I can go to create a new PO, right? So we'll say new PO for webinar, right? We'll just give it a title. And I'll pick who my supplier is, all right? So some generic supplier that we talked about. I can pick my delivery date. Now, again, if we were syncing with an ERP, this data would all kind of come in automatically, but this is just manually doing it. So I'll select next. Now, something that's important to understand here too is that everything that we do here is driven through workflows, okay, that are able to be customized to your business practices. All right, so when I created that, what we ended up with here, and I'll show you actually because I skipped a step here while I was talking. What we ended up with, there are PO items. Yeah, I'll go down to this one here. There's PO items. So you say which parts you have in the PO, what the quantity is that you're ordering. You can have multiples of those items, and those are linked to the part records that you just built, okay, with all the quality requirements. And these are going to be sent down to your supplier. Now, these all have detailed workflows associated with them. These are dynamic workflows that are able to be customized. We have out-of-the-box options, but if you have specific business practices and needs, then we can customize them to your business processes. And so you can see something here that's fairly straightforward. We start out in a draft, and then it's got to go through internal review with the engineering team, with the procurement team, and then it'll get sent and submitted down to the supplier for their review. Okay, so that's the spot that this particular item is sitting at right now. Okay, so I want to show you on the supplier side what that looks like. All right, so as a supplier, I'll come down to another instance of Inspection Manager that I have that's set up for the supplier end. Okay, now as a supplier, as soon as the PO is submitted down to me, I would have a notification for, if I'm the kind of procurement manager or the quality manager or something, that, hey, there's a new PO with new part data that needs to be approved by me. So I get a queue here of all of my tasks and everything that I need to keep track of. So that's the PO that we were just looking at, okay? And so I can either approve it right here if I want to, or I can even click into it and open it up to review it and see all the data. Okay, so I'm able on the supplier side, because again, as a supplier, I have the exact same system, okay? So they're, just as a quick aside, a couple different flavors of this, whether they have the system fully installed with a local installation, or if it's through the cloud. So they can have it through a web browser as a cloud experience, so it's much lighter in that regard. We're offering it in those two flavors because we recognize that there's going to be different modes in which buyers and suppliers interact. And some suppliers may be a little reluctant to do a full installation and deal with IT and all that. So we do have, we are bringing out a cloud offering as well. So it's very, very light on the IT side. Okay, but still with all of the same tools. Okay, so on this side, I've got, this is my PO that I had from my customer. Okay, so I can see the items that were in it. I can open that part directly from here. I can open that up and I can issue work orders against it and such. Okay, and then I can actually approve this, say I accept it as a PO, and then I would end up building out my work orders and jobs. Okay, so that's kind of the starting point of the communication here between the systems. So let's now move over and take a look at a couple of things that happen from there, okay? All right, so once, for the sake of time, I ended up putting this into a presentation format just to be able to hit all of the different highlights here. But once the supplier has that PO in hand, with all of the content data and the quality requirements, then they're able to automatically from there launch jobs, because all the inspection data that they're going to collect on the back end of this process has to be traceable to a specific order number, an internal job that the supplier has, and the PO that's being used as the vehicle to translate the requirements between the two companies. Okay, so all of that traceability is embedded in this system and able to be managed very easily. Okay, so I'm able to create my jobs with the particular demand. And then from there, I'm able to open up the part and review everything that the customer sent to me as the finished part requirement. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the customer has is sending to me specific requirements and designating specific dimensions as critical features, okay? But in addition to that, I need the tools to be able to expand on those requirements, because I might have what some companies call manufacturing critical dimensions, or some other companies refer to them as key features and so on. Whatever your language is, you can customize that in the system. But the concept is as a supplier, have features that I want to monitor as critical features to the process and ensure that they're being held. So we give you all the power of Inspection Manager and the tool sets to be able to do that, to define the sampling rules that you would like to build out your sampling strategy. And we'll see in a minute here how that leverages into the actual sample planning. But per dimension, I define my sampling rules. And then on the next screen here, we're doing that all within the context of manufacturing ops. Okay, so we take the concept of a finished part that you can see up here. That was the customer requirement that we don't touch as a supplier. That's left alone. But I derive from that my in-process inspection requirements and my final inspection requirements. Okay, and so that gets into a whole mess of details. with regard to, I can define things like which features I check on the first piece at each op, which features I check in production at each op. We have all of the sophisticated tools of Inspection Manager brought down to the supplier to manage the content appropriately. Okay. So once I've built out my operations, I've kind of added to the inspection requirements and said, okay, these are my criticals, these are my sampling requirements for each of the dimensions. I can have my AQL tables kind of built into the software as default, so I don't have to do a whole ton of work every single time I get a part. We can really mitigate about 80% of the work that would be done by configuring up the supplier's system with default configuration settings. Okay, so once you are working from the lot level, right, you're able to have defaults for which AQL table you're using for that customer, so you get the appropriate sampling sizes. Okay, so all you have to do as a supplier is create lot samples. We just click a button, and that leverages that data forward to automatically create a sampling plan that looks something like this here. Okay, so I'm able to create all the samples of each one of these line items being a unique piece that has certain inspection criteria. Okay, so the first piece, a way to look at this, is a full inspection requirement, right? I check every feature. And then subsequently from there, my production pieces, I have a certain number of features that are checked for each piece, okay? So this one's kind of staggering it every 8 or so pieces, 9 or so pieces that need to be checked, okay, based on my AQL requirements. All right, so that's how, those are all the tools that the supplier has available to them to be able to define their sampling plan or their quality requirements and kind of expound on what the customer provided to them. Okay, now from there, we need to talk about the actual data collection and the simplicity of that. So we can collect data from any source that you have on your shop floor. We have the tools for it. So whether you're talking about automated inspection equipment like CMMs, we alluded to this before, or digital gauges, handheld gauges, or even manual input. So we have applications for shop floor personnel, for quality inspectors in the QC room, and so on, that communicates those inspection plans and requirements in a context-sensitive manner to each personnel in the process. Okay, so rather than just having Excel spreadsheets and a balloon PDF that travels around, and there's, again, misinterpretation that happens because everybody's kind of trying to figure out from that Excel spreadsheet, what do I need to inspect? That doesn't happen here because we're sending the specific inspection requirements for each stage of the process based on the user and what they've been assigned to. It automatically gets queued up and it's contextualized in that way. Okay, so whatever means by which you're inspecting, you're able to feed that back into a centralized database. Okay, and this is on the supplier side at this point still. Let's keep some awareness of where we're at in the process. So just a couple of points about that, kind of emphasizing that for a specific operation, I get a unique ballooned PDF through the app for that operation. So op 100 here with specific dimensions that need to be checked, and it shows me only what needs to be checked and so on. I'm able to record my results there. Okay, I'm able to monitor SPC trends. So Inspection Manager has a robust SPC analytics tool that's been on the back end for some time. We've also brought that down to the shop floor side as well, so that in process, suppliers are able to monitor the SPC trends of their production cycles. Okay, so they can be proactive in maintaining the quality of their production run rather than reactive after something's gone wrong. Okay. Now, once all that's happened and the suppliers collected all the data back from the shop floor, from their inspection processes, now we get into a really unique side of Inspection Manager that I think is going to be fairly transformative. We all think it's going to be really transformative to the supply chain process, is that per customer, suppliers, per customer, per process, per part type, per anything really, suppliers are able to define checklists. We call them indexes, but to keep things simple for the presentation, we'll refer to it as a checklist. That's a way you can think of it. This is a checklist of all of the items, the reports, the file uploads, the attachments, the forms, etc., that need to be aggregated or collected to submit to the customer. Okay. Now, in this screenshot here, I'm showing a very, very simple process of just an FAI report, right? We need an FAI form submission. We need a material cert. We talked about that was defined on the customer side and sent down. So I upload a material cert against that material and spec out the details. All right, so I'm able to upload a file against that line item, and then a lot inspection report at the end of the process that shows me kind of the full final inspection for all of the pieces that were inspected throughout the production. Okay, so this first step that we're doing, you'll notice there's this package down here. So this is the checklist. The items were uploaded here. So the AS9102 FAI and the material cert were uploaded. Okay. Now I'm able to generate a package. So there's this create package option for the FAI submission. Okay, so there's two steps here. There's the FAI submission to get it approved by my customer so that I can start running production. All right, that's that first package that's here and what we're representing. Okay, so this is a quick look at that FAI. It's in a PDF format. We can deal with things like digital signatures and sign-offs as it's being passed between you and your customer. Okay, and review stages. So you can even see the next workflow step that's up here. Submit this for review. You would click that. If your user has been assigned to that particular task, you see the next step that can be performed for this report, and so on. So this is the Form 1 that's here. If I click through, I kind of skipped over Form 2 in the screenshot here, but this would be Form 3 that has all of the inspection results that came from either your CMM or your manual inspections and so on. Oh, why did that happen? Let's see, we're in here. Okay. So you're able to run those reports very quickly and easily against the list of requirements. Now, once that's been approved by the customer and you've now started running production, the only other piece there is to have the lot inspection report at the end of the process. All right, so you can see now I've uploaded an additional lot inspection. Okay, so I initially uploaded my material cert, my AS9102 report, and created a package. Now I've uploaded my lot inspection report, and I have another package that I've created. That's my final submission to the customer. All right, so with a couple clicks, I'm able to run those reports and transfer all of that data over to the customer so that they're able to see it. Now, that can be done in a whole variety of ways. It's really up to you guys and how you want to define your business logic and the requirements for data exchange. You can either have just the reports that transfer, or you can even have the raw data, the full data set of that's collected into Inspection Manager transferred over as well. Just really depends on how you guys want to work between the supplier and the customer relationship there. Okay. Something else to note, just as an aside, because I'm thinking of it as we're going here, all of these different items, you can think of this as a project management tool. So each of these line items has a kind of a due date or a submission date that's required of it, and a particular person in the company that's assigned to the task. And so that rolls up into things like personal task lists and queues for the work that the projects that you need to work on, and it shows you the next step that you're supposed to be responsible for. Okay, so just as an aside, when you think about the robustness of a platform like this. Okay, so just to give you a quick idea of the lot inspection report here. So this is a screenshot showing just a list of all the features, but all the results across the samples that were inspected across that lot. Okay, and we can do that with traceability to the user or the inspector that inspected the parts. Okay, the specific gauges that were used to inspect the parts. We have an entire gauge management library that can keep track of gauges on both sides of the equation, supplier and customer. So there's full traceability all the way through the process of all of the inspection requirements and the data that was collected against those requirements. with our reporting. Okay. So with that, hopefully that makes add some clarity, I think, to this initial flow chart that we talked through, that we've got the customer defining the product, submitting that down to the supplier. The supplier is able to spec out the manufacturing requirements and how it relates to quality inspections. And they push that, we'll go back, too many clicks. They push that down to their production, the supplier's production, and then they have all of the data collection coming up from their shop floor, and they're able to return that back to the customer through that exchange. So that's about all I have for the presentation side. And we'll hand that back for the Q&A section. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Sam. That was an extremely informative webinar, and as Chris just mentioned, we're gonna go ahead and transition now into the Q&A. Before we do, I just want to mention again, one of the questions I'm seeing in here is, whether a recording of this will be available. Everybody should get an email with a recording. And you can also find an archive on mmsonline.com if you want to go back and go through this again. And finally, I'm going to start asking these guys some questions here, but if anything pops up, again, all you got to do is type it into the interface. And it looks like we got about 12 minutes here, plenty of time. Please, I encourage you to do that. But all right, to get started, so we have one here about which specific ERP systems are supported.
Chris, would you like to take it?
Yeah, sure. So in the grand scheme of things, we're not really too concerned about the specific ERP systems that are being that you're using. We do need to know about it, but we have, as I alluded to in the presentation, we have an open API that's extremely robust and able to link to any sort of external platform, whether it's an ERP system, PLM system. We can integrate in a whole variety of ways and kind of map out the whatever business logic you need to automate within your company.
Okay, okay. Where is the supply chain software hosted?
It can be hosted in any hosted environment, but when you talk about the supply chain in general in our way of doing it, it's the AWS, which is the Amazon data center, which under the highest security, if you will, wings, which where the government is hosting their stuff. So it's hardly secure there. But there are company OEMs, large companies who prefer to host it in their environment, intranet, so it can be hosted in their environment. So the whole application, including the hosted environment, can be under the intranet, and usually it's hosted under AWS secured server.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll add one thing to that real quickly,
sure.
If I could. So there's, I think I alluded to this in the presentation as well, that there's a couple different modes that customers can operate in. The customer in the scenario that I outlined, so the green guy, the global engineering group that's on the screen right now, the customer will always have a local installation, a local database, and the cloud portion from their perspective is more of an exchange platform. It's an end-to-end, highly encrypted exchange of data. And then the supplier has an option of, do I want to have a local installation with a local database, or do I want to have a cloud-based storage?
And so this would address questions, I would imagine, about data security. That's part of the answer, right?
Yeah, it's a bit of a detailed conversation, but our end-to-end encryption and the security that's there is really highly sophisticated. So I'll just leave it at that. But
okay, does the HiQA 360 package does it have considerations for PPAP submissions? No, it's a big concern in automotive and some other manufacturing as well.
Absolutely. And this is part of the whole APQP, if you will, that under that you have the FMEA, DFMEA, PPAP, everything is part of this process. I mean, we didn't have time probably to show everything, but I don't know if Chris have a quick second just to jump there and show this level of the supply chain platform, but definitely PPAP is part of it.
Yeah, and actually I was thinking about that. I almost snuck a slide in that showed that because I thought that question might come up. But what we showed as far as that checklist, or what we refer to as an index for managing the project and all of the form and report requirements and such, that can expand into the APQP level of sophisticated forms. Okay, and so we even have it's a whole other webinar. I believe we're doing a webinar specifically addressing that need, but we have some really sophisticated apps that are coming out right now for managing things like your FMEAs and P flows and control plans and such within the APQP process, because those are unique from something like an FAI or a PPAP that are reports. FMEA and a control plan and such, those are more living, breathing documents that are kind of dynamically changed as you modify your process requirements in the structure there. So we have an extremely robust series of applications for managing that content, all again within the same inspection manager ecosystem, and able to be communicated back and forth through the supply chain platform. Exactly how I demonstrated that we can do FAI submissions, right? You can pass the data and the content back and forth through workflows between the customer and the supplier. And companies can even do this internally. They don't necessarily need their customer or their suppliers to be on the platform in order to use the system. They can use it independently and just export the content in whatever format they need to if they want to just email forms and reports and such down to their suppliers or up to their customers. And that's often kind of like a crawl, walk, run approach to implementing systems like this.
Okay, we got another one here that touches on PPAP, goes a little broader. So the templates or forms, the questioner doesn't know, frankly, I don't either, whatever you get, the templates or forms for PPAP or FEMA or process flow, are these customizable within the application?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
It's much more robust in terms of capabilities. The system come up with kind of out of the box multiple forms, SPPAP, control plan, etc. And this is not Excel, just to make sure we understand. This is an application, because most of, we are looking to the upper level, talking about APQP and everything in beneath, or 99.9% today are Excel, and this is not Excel. This is an application integrated with our quality management system and supply chain. And then those forms coming out of the box, and each form can be customizable to the purpose that it serves. More than that, you can create a family of forms for specific project that contain all the relevant forms, and those can communicate with suppliers with all the relevant, like control plan, FMEA, and PPAP, and everything into it. So it's very, very robust, and it's application. It's not Excel.
Interesting. Will you be able to export to PDF, take a compiled report, with everything, including page numbers and everything else, and use that as a final submission, export it to a PDF?
Absolutely, yes. And it can be even JPEG, Word documents, any type of format can be encapsulated on the submission, and it will automatically convert everything together to a PDF. Yes, with page number and everything there, including content, page of submission content, etc.
Okay. So this question says, oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Real quick to tack onto that too. That includes electronic signatures for the packages as well, both on the supplier and the customer side, when you're dealing with like the review and approval processes.
Okay. Okay. This questioner says, he says, I see a balloon drawing, like you were showing us, a balloon drawing that was created by a supplier. This is kind of hard to interpret. Can I, as a supplier, also create them?
It doesn't matter. In our case, who is create the balloons. The idea is that when it comes from the buyer side or the customer side, then it will come with all the requirements and everything is already extracted based on this bill of characteristic. Now, if the supplier does it, it will have the same impact, but it will start on the supplier side, and then he can communicate it back to the OEM. But from our point of view, it's really transparent.
Okay. Okay. What about cost? That's a pretty direct one.
Well, it's very interesting question. I mean, but the idea is, and again, it depends the configuration, if you will. At the end of the day, it's going to be either if the supplier is using the cloud-based and he's able to do everything in our system except of creating new part, then it's one thing. And if you would like to do parts for others, if you will, not for the same, only for his customer, then it's a different thing. So it will be very, very helpful to take this question offline and address it one-on-one with any of this participant that has this relevant question.
Sure. And that goes for all the other ones that I'm seeing listed here that I can already tell it's 11:58. We're not going to get to. Let's see. We got time for one more, maybe. Let's see here. Is it Net Inspect compatible? Is the 360 package Net Inspect compatible?
It is. I mean, actually, yes. I mean, Net Inspect is mainly taking the actually getting FAI in many cases to their site, and we have in Inspection Manager the ability to export it out to Net Inspect. Yeah.
Okay. I'm having a hard time interpreting this one, but maybe I'll read it word for word if you guys if you guys don't get the gist, or the questioner can type at me if I don't ask it right. But so do both the supplier and the customer, do they both need to have the same package for building a relationship in the way that you discuss? So like, you know, so the supplier can access the same inspection plans as the customer.
Yes and no, not necessarily. It really depends the depth and the level that you would like to communicate. But generally speaking, the supplier can have only a fraction, if you will, of the system. So he will be able to execute the project that he gets from his supplier. And even using it on a browser base, he doesn't need to install anything in his side, but he will be able to do everything that required that came from his customer. But he will not be able in this, let's call it package or starting package, to do other job for others, only for his customer. And again, we can get deeper into it one-on-one to understand what people wants to do and address each question based on their needs.
Yeah. I'll throw in my 2 cents on that question there. So I think one of the things that's really attractive in this presentation here is the tools that are available in building out inspection plans and doing the automated ballooning and all the data collection and such. And so I think part of the question there might be that do I have to, does my customer or my suppliers have to be on this platform in order for me to use those tools?
Right.
And the answer to that is no. We have customers, tons of customers over the last several years who have been using these tools to automate their own quality processes and such. And you can export the data in any way that you need to share it with suppliers or customers that you have that aren't on the platform. But to what this is doing is bringing it to the next level where if the two sides of the chain are on the platform and using the inspection manager product, rather than having to export Excel-based or PDF-based files and reports to share, you can now do it just directly from system to system.
Interesting.
So actually what we are sharing here, and going back to my 10-15 minutes slide presentation, we're actually looking into supply chain. Is like my suppliers is my extended arm of my shop floor. Either it's in the first floor or 300 miles away. I would like to create what I call transparency, if you will, and eliminate those interpretation that's like, here is a file, here is a package, here is a PO, and now go and get to understand what I'm asking you to do. And it's including all the collaboration in between customer and suppliers, like engineering changes, which is very critical, how you handle engineering changes today. Well, it's handled very well here. When you got engineering change, you know exactly what change, you see exactly what change on the print. There are no big surprises. So it's much deeper layer than just submitting a PO and then a balloon part.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, we're going to have to wrap there. Great presentation, guys. I'm seeing that we've still got a large portion of attendees here, but unfortunately we're out of time. So if you typed in a question and we didn't get to it, or if you just think of something later that you would like to ask Sam or Chris, you know, as they mentioned earlier, you can get in touch with them directly. And finally, on a final reminder, everybody can go back and revisit this presentation. You'll receive a link to it. So thank you, Sam. Thank you, Chris. Thanks to everyone for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.